In This Week in Military History, we explore the brief but decisive June 1967 conflict between Israel and the Arab states of Egypt, Syria and Jordan, known as the Six-Day War. This conflict saw Israel launch preemptive strikes at her principal regional threats in one of the most dramatic and successful strategic employments of air power in military history. Having survived two major attempts by the surrounding Arab powers to destroy it, the fledgling state of Israel determined to seize the initiative in 1967 against a backdrop of constant border incursions and threats. On June 5th, Operation Focus was conducted by the Israeli Air Force as two waves of air raids struck 25 Egyptian airbases, destroying 90% of Egypt's fighters and strike aircraft on the ground. A third wave struck Syria and Jordan airbases, and by day's end, Israeli Air Force had won full control of the skies over the Middle East. Despite establishing air superiority, fierce fighting continued for several days. The ground war in Egypt began on the same day. Israeli tanks and infantry raced across the border and into the Sinai Peninsula and along the Mediterranean coast. A second front of the war was opened in Jordan, and initial attacks were made by Jordanian and Iraqi forces along the West Bank as Israeli defense forces surrounded Jerusalem. Israeli forces set about driving Arab units from the West Bank and eventually captured East Jerusalem on the morning of June 7th. The northern front saw Syrian forces attack for several days until inevitably accepting a ceasefire on June 8th. Regardless of the ceasefire, Syrian forces began shelling Israel once again, prompting the IDF to attack on June the 9th and 10th and resulting in them gaining full control of the Golan Heights. Syria demanded an emergency session of the UN Security Council on the 10th of June, forcing the ceasefire to go into effect on the Golan Heights, where it remained until October 6, 1973. By the time the conflict was over, the IDF had suffered 776 killed, 4,517 wounded, 15 captured, and 20 civilians in Israel killed as well. By comparison, the Arab states suffered more than 15,000 killed and more than 1,000 captured, as well as hundreds of tanks and aircraft destroyed. Following the Six-Day War, the United Nations Security Council prepared a carefully worded resolution, UN Security Council Resolution 242, to guide all parties in future talks. The resolution was passed on November 22, 1967. Join us next time for another segment of This Week in Military History with the Pritzker Military Museum and Library.